Tommy Norris just thought his life couldn't get any messier after his mother's death. But episode 2 proved him dead wrong. What happens when family grief collides with oil field chaos and a cartel threat that refuses to stay buried? Landman Season 2 episode 2 didn't waste a single second getting into the thick of it, and honestly, I'm still recovering from how much they packed into this one. If the premiere was about setting up Tommy's new reality as the head honcho at MTEX Oil, this episode was all about watching that reality spiral completely out of control. And let me tell you, it delivered on every front. We picked up right where we left off, with Tommy dealing with the aftermath of his mother Dorothy's death. Now, you'd think the show would give him a moment to breathe, maybe process his grief a little. But no, this is Landman, and Tommy Norris doesn't get to catch a break. Instead, we got to see him juggling funeral arrangements, his father's stubbornness, and the never-ending demands of running an oil company all at once. And somehow, Billy Bob Thornton made every second of it feel raw and real. The episode opened with Tommy driving out to the assisted living facility to deal with his father, Teal, and if you thought Sam Elliott was impressive in that brief scene last episode, wait until you see him here. Teal was still sitting outside, watching the horizon like he had all the time in the world, even though his wife had just died. When Tommy approached him, there was this tension in the air. You could feel years of unresolved issues between them just hanging there. Teal didn't jump into Tommy's arms crying. No, he sat there stone-faced, almost like he was refusing to acknowledge what had happened. Tommy tried to talk to him about Dorothy, about the funeral, about what comes next. But Teal just kept deflecting, making these cryptic comments about the oil business and how Tommy better not screw it up now that he's in charge. It was frustrating to watch, but also fascinating. Here's a man who just lost his wife, and instead of mourning, he's lecturing his son about business. Classic avoidance, right? But I have a feeling there's more to Teal than just being a stubborn old man. I think he's going to become Tommy's unexpected mentor, the person who helps him navigate the cutthroat world he's now stuck in. Meanwhile, back at MTEX, Cammy was wasting no time asserting her authority. And let me just say, this woman is quickly becoming one of my favorite characters. Last episode, she gave us that killer speech about being meaner than Monty. Well, this episode she backed it up with action. There was a board meeting where some of the senior executives were clearly testing her, trying to see if she'd fold under pressure or defer to Tommy for the big decisions. One guy in particular, I think his name was Gerald, kept pushing back on her proposals, suggesting they slow down on expansion and play it safe until things stabilized. Cammy listened to him talk, nodding along like she was actually considering his points, and then she just shut him down. She explained in detail why playing it safe was the fastest way to lose their competitive edge. She had numbers, projections, and a plan that was so well thought out that even Tommy looked impressed. Gerald tried to argue back, but she cut him off mid-sentence. The board will follow my lead, or the board will find new employment. It's that simple. The room went silent. You could see everyone recalculating their approach to her. This wasn't Monty's widow playing dress-up as a CEO. This was a woman who had clearly been paying attention all those years, learning the game. And now she was ready to play it better than anyone else. But here's where it gets interesting. After the meeting, Tommy pulled Cammy aside to talk. He congratulated her on handling the board, but you could tell he was also a little concerned. He asked her if she was sure about moving forward so aggressively, especially with everything still so uncertain, and Cammy gave him this look, like she was sizing him up. Tommy, I appreciate your concern, but I didn't hire you to second guess me. I hired you to execute. So execute. It was a power move, plain and simple. She was reminding him that no matter how much responsibility he has, she's still the one calling the shots, and I think this is going to be a major source of tension moving forward. Tommy's used to being the guy who makes the calls, who fixes problems on the fly. But now he's got someone above him who's just as strong-willed, just as stubborn, and maybe even smarter than he is. I can already see the clashes coming, and honestly, I'm here for it. Watching these two butt heads is going to be one of the highlights of the season. Then we shifted focus to Cooper, and oh boy, things got complicated fast. You remember last episode he struck oil and was celebrating with Ariana, talking about all that money rolling in. Well, this episode reality started to sink in for both of them. Cooper was out at the drill site, overseeing operations, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. Too smoothly, actually. I kept waiting for something to go wrong because this is Landman, and nothing ever stays perfect for long. Cooper was talking to one of the crew members about expanding operations, maybe drilling a second well nearby to maximize the field's potential. He was excited, full of energy, making plans like he'd been doing this his whole life. But then Ariana showed up and the mood shifted completely. She pulled him aside. away from the noise of the machinery, and you could see she was upset. She started asking him about safety protocols, about what happens if there's an accident, about how much time he's spending away from her and the baby. Cooper tried to reassure her, telling her he's being careful, that he knows what he's doing, but Ariana wasn't buying it. She reminded him that his father has been in this business for decades and still ends up in life or death situations all the time. What makes you think you're going to be any different? It was a valid point, and Cooper didn't have a good answer. The conversation between Cooper and Ariana got even more intense when she finally dropped the bomb that I think we all saw coming. She's pregnant again, and she's terrified. Cooper's face went through about 5 different emotions in the span of 3 seconds. First shock, then excitement, then worry, and finally this heavy realization that everything just got a lot more complicated. Ariana didn't share his momentary excitement though. She immediately started talking about how they can't keep living like this, with him out in the field risking his life every single day while she's home alone with one baby and another on the way. She asked him point blank if all this money is worth it if he's not around to spend it with them, and honestly, I felt for her in that moment. Here's a young woman who's watching her partner chase the same dangerous dream his father has been chasing for years, and she's seen firsthand where that leads. Cooper tried to calm her down, promising her that things would be different, that he'd be more careful, that they'd figure it out together. But you could see the doubt in Ariana's eyes. She's not convinced, and I don't think she should be. What made this scene even more powerful was when Ariana brought up Tommy. She told Cooper that she loves his father, respects him even, but she doesn't want their life to look like his. She doesn't want to be the woman sitting at home wondering if today's the day she gets the call that her husband isn't coming home. Cooper got defensive at that, saying his dad has provided for their family, that he's survived in this business longer than most. But Ariana shot back with something that hit hard. Survived isn't the same as thrived, Cooper. Look at your parents. Look at how that marriage ended. Is that what you want for us? And man, that landed. Cooper didn't have a response to that. He just stood there staring at her, realizing that maybe she had a point. The episode left their storyline hanging right there with all this tension unresolved. I have a feeling this pregnancy is going to be a major plot point moving forward, and it's going to force Cooper to make some really tough choices about what kind of life he wants to build. Back at the Norris household, things were equally messy. Ainsley was dealing with the aftermath of getting into TCU, and honestly, her storyline this episode made me cringe all over again. She was talking to her mom Angela about college, about what comes next, and it was clear that Ainsley still has absolutely no idea what she's gotten herself into. Angela was trying to have a serious conversation with her about responsibility, about how college is going to be different from high school, about how she needs to take things more seriously. But Ainsley just kept brushing her off, acting like everything was going to be fine because she's a cheerleader and everyone loves her. Angela finally snapped and told her that being pretty and popular isn't going to cut it in the real world. You need to actually learn something, Ainsley. You need to figure out what you want to do with your life beyond shaking pom-poms. It was harsh, but also necessary. Ainsley looked genuinely hurt, like she couldn't understand why her mom was being so mean to her. And I think that's the problem. She's been coddled her whole life, never had to face any real consequences, and now reality is starting to catch up with her. The tension between Angela and Ainsley spilled over into another family dinner scene, and this time Tommy was caught right in the middle of it. Angela had cooked again, something elaborate that probably cost way too much money, and everyone was sitting around the table, trying to act normal, but you could feel the awkwardness in the air. Ainsley was pouting, barely touching her food. Cooper was distracted, clearly still thinking about his conversation with Ariana, and Tommy looked like he wanted to be literally anywhere else. Angela tried to lighten the mood by asking everyone about their day, but nobody was really engaging. Finally, Tommy made another one of his classic Tommy jokes, something about how the only thing harder than running an oil company is surviving dinner with his family. Angela didn't laugh. Instead, she gave him this cold stare and said, "Maybe if you actually showed up for your family instead of just making jokes about us, things would be different." The table went dead silent. Cooper and Ainsley both looked down at their plates, clearly uncomfortable. Tommy tried to defend himself, saying he's doing the best he can, that he's juggling a lot right now with his new position and his mother's death. But Angela wasn't having it. She told him that he's always juggling, always has an excuse, and that's exactly why their marriage fell apart. It was brutal to watch, but also kind of cathartic. These are things that needed to be said, and Angela finally said them. Tommy didn't respond right away. He just sat there, taking it all in, and you could see the weight of everything pressing down on him. His mother just died, his father won't talk to him, his son is risking his life in the oil fields. His daughter is completely unprepared for the real world, his ex-wife resents him. And his boss is challenging his authority at every turn. The man is drowning and nobody seems to notice or care after a long, painful silence. Tommy stood up from the table, grabbed his jacket, and walked out without saying another word. Angela called after him, but he didn't turn around, he just got in his truck and drove off into the night. And honestly, I don't blame him. Sometimes you just need to escape, even if it's only for a little while. But here's the thing about Tommy, he doesn't get to escape. Because just as he was driving down the highway, his phone rang. And when he answered it, his face went pale. Something had happened at one of the drill sites, and he needed to get there immediately. The shift to the drill site was where things got really intense. Tommy arrived to find emergency vehicles everywhere, lights flashing, people running around. In controlled chaos, he jumped out of his truck and immediately started barking orders, trying to figure out what happened. One of the site managers filled him in. There had been an equipment failure, a valve had blown, and 3 workers were injured. One of them was in critical condition. Tommy's first question was whether it was Cooper. The manager shook his head. No, and you could see the relief wash over Tommy's face. But that relief was short-lived because the situation was still dire. The injured worker, a guy named Martinez, was being loaded into an ambulance, and it didn't look good. Tommy went over to talk to Martinez's wife, who had just arrived on the scene. She was hysterical, asking if her husband was going to be okay, if he was going to survive, and Tommy, in true Tommy fashion, didn't sugarcoat it. He told her honestly that he didn't know, but that they were doing everything they could. The wife broke down crying, and Tommy just stood there with her, not saying anything, just being present. It was a powerful moment that reminded us why Tommy is good at what he does. He doesn't run from the hard stuff, he faces it head on. After the ambulance left, Tommy had to deal with the aftermath. The site was shut down pending an investigation, which meant lost revenue and angry investors. He called Cammy to fill her in, and you could hear the exhaustion in his voice. Cammy's response was ice cold. Fix it, Tommy. I don't care how, just fix it. She hung up before he could even respond. Tommy stood there in the dark, surrounded by silent equipment and worried workers. And you could see him questioning everything. Is this really worth it? Is this the life he wants? But he didn't have time to spiral because Cooper showed up at the site. Having heard about the accident, father and son stood there together. And Cooper asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Could this have been prevented? Tommy's answer was honest and heartbreaking. In this business, something can always be prevented, but we make choices based on speed and profit. And sometimes those choices have consequences. It was a moment of real honesty between them. And I think it's the first time Cooper truly understood what his father has been carrying all these years. The episode took an even darker turn when Tommy got back to his truck and found an envelope tucked under his windshield wiper. He opened it, and his face went from tired to terrified in seconds. Inside was a photo of Cooper at the drill site with a red circle drawn around his head. There was no note, no explanation, just that photo, and suddenly everything clicked into place. The cartel hadn't forgotten about Tommy or his family. They were still out there, still watching, still waiting for the right moment to make their move. Tommy crumpled the photo in his fist, looking around the dark site like he might spot whoever left it. But there was nobody there, just shadows and silence. He immediately called someone, I'm guessing law enforcement or maybe a private security contact, and told them he needed protection for his family now, not tomorrow, not next week, but right now. The panic in his voice was real, and it made my heart race, because if the cartel is back in play, then nobody in Tommy's orbit is safe. Not Cooper, not Ainsley, not Angela, not anyone. This threat adds a whole new layer to everything that's been happening. Suddenly Cooper's dangerous job isn't just about equipment failures and workplace accidents. There's an active threat targeting him specifically, and Tommy knows it's because of him. Because of choices he made last season. The guilt on his face was crushing. He's spent his whole life trying to provide for his family, trying to keep them safe. And now his past is putting them directly in harm's way. When he got home that night, he didn't tell Angela about the photo. He didn't tell Cooper either. He just kept it to himself, carrying that weight alone like he always does. But you could see it eating at him. Every sound made him jump. Every car that drove by made him look out the window. He was a man on edge, waiting for the other shoe to drop. And honestly, so am I, because if the cartel is making moves, then this season is about to get a whole lot more dangerous. The next morning brought no relief for Tommy. He showed up at MTEX headquarters looking like he hadn't slept at all, which he probably hadn't. Cammy called him into her office first thing, and you could tell she was not happy. The drill site accident had made its way to the investors, and they were getting nervous again. She had Tommy walk her through exactly what happened, every detail. Every decision that led up to that valve blowing. Tommy explained the technical aspects, the maintenance logs, the safety protocols that were supposedly in place. But Cammy kept pushing, asking harder questions, digging deeper. Finally, she asked the question that mattered most. Was this negligence or bad luck? Tommy hesitated, and that hesitation told her everything she needed to know. There were corners cut, weren't there? Cammy asked. Tommy tried to explain that in the oil business, you're always balancing safety with efficiency, that sometimes you have to make judgment calls. But Cammy shut that down immediately. Not anymore, not under my watch. From now on, every safety protocol gets followed to the letter. I don't care if it slows us down. I don't care if it costs us money, nobody dies. For MTEX profits. Understood. It was a powerful statement, and it put Tommy in his place. But it also created a problem. Because following every protocol to the letter means slower production, higher costs, and unhappy investors. After leaving Cammy's office, Tommy ran into one of the board members in the hallway. The guy pulled him aside and basically told him that Cammy's new safety-first approach was going to tank the company. He suggested that Tommy needed to manage her to help her understand how the business really works. Tommy's response was perfect. You want to manage Cammy? Be my guest. I'll send flowers to your funeral. The board member didn't find that funny, but I sure did. It showed that despite all the tension between Tommy and Cammy, he respects her authority. And he's not going to undermine her, even if he disagrees with her decisions. He's going to execute them like she asked. That's actually pretty admirable when you think about it. Tommy could easily play politics, turn the board against her, maybe even position himself to take over completely. But he's not doing that. He's being loyal, even when it's hard. Meanwhile, the situation with his father Teal was finally getting some attention. Tommy drove back out to the assisted living facility to start making arrangements for Dorothy's funeral. Teal was in his room this time, sitting in a chair by the window, staring out at nothing. Tommy tried to talk to him about the service, about what Dorothy would have wanted. But Teal barely responded. Finally, Tommy lost his patience a little and asked his father why he was being so difficult about everything. And that's when Teal finally opened up. He told Tommy that he and Dorothy had been together for 52 years. 52 years of marriage, of partnership, of building a life together. And now she was gone, and he didn't know who he was supposed to be without her. It was the most honest thing Teal had said since he appeared on screen. And it completely changed the dynamic between him and Tommy. For the first time, Tommy saw his father not as the stubborn, impossible old man, but as someone who was genuinely lost and grieving. Tommy sat down next to him, and they had a real conversation. Teal started talking about the old days, about working in the oil fields when Tommy was just a kid, about the sacrifices he made and the mistakes he wished he could take back. He told Tommy that he spent so much time chasing success that he forgot to actually live his life. And now, looking back, he realized that all those long hours and missed moments weren't worth it. Dorothy deserved better. You deserved better. I was so busy trying to provide that I forgot to be present. It hit Tommy hard because he's living the exact same pattern. He's making the exact same mistakes his father made. And hearing Teal admit his regrets was like looking into a mirror of his own future. Teal then said something that I think is going to stick with Tommy for the rest of the season. You've got a second chance here, son. Don't waste it like I did. Your kids need you, not your money. Not the life you think you're building for them. They need you. Tommy didn't respond with words. He just nodded, and you could see tears forming in his eyes. It was such a raw, vulnerable moment between father and son. And Sam Elliott and Billy Bob Thornton absolutely crushed that scene. After that conversation, Tommy and Teal actually started planning the funeral together. They talked about Dorothy's favorite flowers, her favorite songs, the people she'd want there. And through that process, you could see them reconnecting, finding common ground in their shared grief. It was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. Later that day, Tommy called Cooper and Ainsley to tell them about the funeral arrangements. Cooper said he'd be there, no question, but then Tommy did something unexpected. He told Cooper about the photo, about the cartel threat. Cooper's reaction was immediate anger. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Why didn't you warn me? Tommy explained that he was trying to protect him, that he didn't want Cooper to panic. But Cooper wasn't having it. I'm not a kid anymore, Dad. You can't just hide things from me and expect that to keep me safe. It was a fair point, and Tommy knew it. The conversation between Tommy and Cooper ended with an agreement. Cooper would stay alert, would take precautions, but he wouldn't stop working. Because running scared is exactly what the cartel wants. If we let them control us with fear, then they've already won. Tommy respected that. even though every parental instinct in him wanted to lock Cooper in a safe room somewhere. Until this threat passed. But Cooper was right, they couldn't live their lives in fear, they had to be smart, be careful, but also keep moving forward. Tommy arranged for private security to watch Cooper's place and the drill sites he was working on. It wasn't foolproof, but it was something. The episode moved toward its conclusion with Dorothy's funeral. The whole family gathered, including Angela, who put aside her anger with Tommy for the day. Ainsley was there, surprisingly mature and composed. Cooper came with Ariana and the baby. And Teal stood at the front, looking older and more fragile than we'd seen him before. Tommy gave the eulogy and it was simple but heartfelt. He talked about his mother's strength, her quiet wisdom, the way she held the family together even when things were falling apart. He admitted that he hadn't appreciated her enough while she was alive, that he'd taken her for granted because she was always just there. And now that she was gone, he realized how much of his foundation she had been. It wasn't a fancy speech, there were no elaborate metaphors or poetic language, it was just honest. And that made it powerful. After the service, the family gathered at Tommy's place. It was awkward at first, everyone navigating their complicated relationships and unspoken tensions. But slowly, things thawed. Angela and Ainsley actually had a decent conversation about college and the future. Cooper and Tommy talked about the business, about safety measures, about being smarter moving forward, and Teal sat in the corner, watching his family with this expression that was hard to read. Sadness, definitely, but also maybe some pride. Like he was seeing that despite all his mistakes, despite all the damage he'd done, something good had still come from it all. Tommy went over to sit with him, and Teal asked him a question. "Are you happy, son?" Tommy didn't answer right away. He looked around the room at his broken family, thought about the threats hanging over them, the impossible job he'd inherited, all the ways his life was complicated and messy. And then he said something that surprised me. "I don't know if happy is the word, but I'm here. I'm present, and I'm trying." "That's more than I could say a year ago," Teal nodded, satisfied with that answer. Sometimes trying is enough. But of course, Landman couldn't let us end on a peaceful note. As the family gathering was winding down and people were starting to leave, Tommy's phone buzzed. He looked down at it and his face went white. It was a text from an unknown number. Just 4 words, "We're closer than you think." Tommy immediately stood up, scanning the room, looking out the windows. His hand went to his phone, ready to call security, call the police, call someone, but then he stopped. Because he realized something. If the cartel wanted to hurt his family, they would have done it already. This was psychological warfare. They were trying to break him, trying to make him paranoid and desperate. And he couldn't let them win, so instead of panicking, Tommy deleted the text, put his phone away, and went back to his family. He hugged Ainsley, shook Cooper's hand, and even shared a moment with Angela. He was choosing to be present, to live his life despite the fear. But the final shot of the episode was chilling. The camera pulled back from Tommy's house, showing us the street outside. And there, parked a few houses down, was a black SUV with tinted windows. Someone was watching. Someone was waiting, and Tommy had no idea how close the danger really was. This episode absolutely delivered on drama, tension, and character development. We saw Tommy struggling under impossible pressure from every direction. We saw Cooper and Ariana facing the reality of their situation. We watched Cammy establish herself as a formidable force at MTEX, and we witnessed a beautiful, painful reconciliation between Tommy and his father. But most importantly, we got confirmation that the cartel storyline is far from over. In fact, it's just getting started. And I have no idea how Tommy is going to protect his family while also running a company and dealing with his personal demons. But I absolutely cannot wait to find out. For more weekly breakdowns and updates on Landman Season 2, make sure to like this video and subscribe to Teleboss 2. Trust me, you don't want to miss what's coming next, because if this episode is any indication, things are about to get absolutely wild. Hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and I'll see you in the next breakdown, where we'll dive into episode 3 and hopefully get some answers about what the cartel is really planning. Until then, stay safe out there, and remember, in the oil business, nothing stays buried forever.